Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
Plein Air magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
"23 million years ago, as the Earth's crust shifted to accommodate the Pacific's ring of fire, the North American plate collided with the Pacific plate, and a lone volcano released its fury on what is now known as Southern California. The volcano's extinction came as geologically sudden as its life itself, but its journey continued. Riding the crest of the San Andreas Fault, the dome was split in half at the rate of 1 inch per year. Today, 1/2 of that once great volcano is 200 miles north of its severed twin, their journey apart continuing at the rate of 1 mile every 100,000 years.
My name is Stefan Baumann, and welcome to The Grand View. Tonight we're going to uncover one of the secret gems of the National Park System. Pinnacles National Monument is a land in motion. Her story starts over 23 million years ago and 195 miles south of here.
Well, when we look at the landscape of Pinnacles National Monument, we really are looking at different processes, different time periods in history. We know they're of volcanic origin, but we don't have volcanoes in the area, but we certainly have plenty of earthquakes. We're just a stone's throw away, if you will, from the famed San Andreas Fault. And this area of California has been measured to move about 1 inch a year in a north to northwesterly direction, and that's where the clues lie. About 190 miles south of where we are, outside of present-day city of Lancaster, lies the remains of an ancient volcano. And those rock formations there match exactly to what we find here at Pinnacles National Monument. Approximately 23 million years ago, a geological time, a volcano was forming along this area, and that the activity and the resulting activity produced the rock formations, and that we would later know as pinnacles. The talus caves we find are literally a jumble of rocks that have been broken away from the canyons, falling into the narrow canyon slots, and creating a cave environment. When the monument was established in 1908, it was set aside primarily for the rock formations we know today as pinnacles, but also because of the unique caves we call today the talus caves. The passageways are not going to be as extensive as, say, a Mammoth Cave, and the chamber is certainly not as large as we would find in Carlsbad. But what does make them unique is that they have multiple chambers, multiple skylights, and provide a variety of habitat for different animals in there. It allows visitors to make their way through one section and pop out in another. Generally, the rock formations here are referred to as pinnacles, but there are different sections to it, one including the high peaks. If you were to hike to the high peaks from the east portion of the monument, it would involve over 1,000-foot elevation gain, nearly 2 miles to access the main junction point. It really gives you an idea of being removed from the other sections of the park and being really inside those volcanic remains. If you're coming from the west side, it's very dramatic. You see it right away, a very steep trail up the Juniper Canyon to the upper portions of those high peak areas, views of the Salinas Valley, and a sense of that open space and the wilderness that exists here. Really the future for Pinnacles is going to be linked to the fact that national parks are not static, that they're changing and they're evolving. Just like the natural processes, the values that we place on these, and not only as individuals, but as a nation, as a society. And that means that there'll be many new challenges to take if we're going to continue to enjoy this park for another 100 years.
Pinnacles National Monument was a very special place to our ancestors. It was primarily a seasonal area. This canyon has always been in native hands. We've always been here. It served as a safe haven for many of the native peoples whom did not like the restrictions at the mission of San Juan Bautista. Many of the individuals were rounded up, taken over to the mission, and those whom did not like the restrictions would return to their band or village, usually which was no longer in existence, and they were rounded up again because their labor was needed to build the missions. 1 or 2 were killed to set an example what happens to runaways. Those individuals who did not want to experience that would end up in this canyon. We've opened up my great-grandfather's trust allotment for all indigenous people whom are in need of traditional lands for ceremony. My mother believed that when ceremony stops, so does the earth. I too believe that. So consequently, the ceremonies that take place here, I feel it allows our mother, the earth, to live a little bit longer. I know when I am in a different space and or place, I will ask the ancestors of that land to guide me so that my actions, my words that I share will be that which will honor them. I ask the ancestral spirits of where I am for permission to be there. Usually with purifying myself first with sage. You're purifying yourself. You're purifying your eyes so you see but the truth. Your mouth so you speak but the truth. Your ears so you hear but the truth. And then your body so you are truth where it is you are standing. Holding a tradition sacred. Holding a place and or site sacred is very important. We're in a society that is so absent of the sacred. When I go out of the canyon, I find it difficult. And I can't wait to get back here.
Bats have an annual cycle, and let's just start with May and kind of follow that through. In May, the females come back together. They grouped together. There's some question about whether that's just a social thing or whether it's actually creating the right environment for pupping to happen. But they form together in these groups before they have their young, which are pups. And the pups stay clustered together when the females go out and forage at night. That's been shown to be very important for maintaining the pup's body temperature, which becomes important for their growth. Because every ounce of energy that they save in not maintaining their heat, they can then put into growing up and getting larger and advancing, which is important because they need to be able to fly in about 4 weeks. So there's a lot of growth in a really short amount of time. On our species list is the California condor. Considering that there's only 189 of them in existence, I would consider them to be the most threatened species. Condors have not been seen in the park since the early 80s, when the remaining wild birds were taken into captivity for the captive breeding program. There's a release site in the Ventana wilderness of the Los Padres National Forest where they're currently doing releases, and we've had 2 suspected sightings of condors in the parks that we believe may have come from those populations. If you were to fly over Pinnacles in an airplane, we stand out. We're a rock formation that has been moving northward for 23 million years. And we're 195 miles from home. And we don't look anything like anything that surrounds us. And to me, that's what makes, Pinnacles special. It's not only the rocks, but it's a sense of old California. This is what Pinnacles looked like 150 years ago.
Well, after a long hike, hiking all through the Pinnacles National Monument, I've actually chosen a very special place. This place is up at the reservoir. Now, Pinnacles gets very little rainfall, so they actually dammed an area up and created this wonderful reservoir, which gives us an opportunity not only to paint these beautiful rocks, but these wonderful, wonderful reflections. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take my cobalt blue and my burnt sienna and squeeze them out of my palette. Pick up a nice little sketching brush and begin the main rock that we're going to paint today. Now the main rock is where I'm going to start. And I want to make sure I start my sketch small enough. We want to be sure that we can get the reservoir, and if we don't paint our rock small enough, we're not going to be able to get a nice reflection. Many beginning students, what they do is they get out here, they get all excited, and they start painting everything really large, and then they run out of canvas. So what I suggest to do is to actually shrink the sketch down. You can always build out to the edges and make the composition more interesting. But if you don't shrink it down at the beginning, you are not going to be able to get the entire scene on your canvas. Right now we just want to very quickly place just some main lines and little footnotes so that we can come back later and enhance the sketch. I'm going to cast a blue wash just as a little footnote to remind me that this was all in shadow early in the morning. Later on, I'm sure that the light's going to light this whole area up. Now on top of that blue wash, I'm going to place a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm going to outline the shapes and forms of the rocks. And now I think I'm coming to the conclusion of my sketch. And now we're going to start doing what we came out here to do, and that's actually paint. I'm going to squeeze out a little titanium white on my palette. I'm going to squirt out just a nice big pile of white, just like that. I want to be sure that I have plenty to use for my entire painting. And I'm going to pick up a brand new brush, nice big one, and I'm going to wet it with my turpentine. And I'm going to go into my white. I'm going to pick up some of that white, get it to a different area of my palette, and I'm going to introduce blue to it. And I'm going to use the darker value of these two colors first. And I'm just going to apply a nice thick coat of this on my canvas toward the very top of my sketch here. This is going to be the darkest area of my sky. Now right now the sky is fairly flat and blue, but there are some little wispy clouds starting to come across the sky, and we'll worry about those a little bit later. You'll notice that behind the mountain it gets a little bit lighter, a little bit warmer. So at this point what we're going to introduce is a little bit more white to this color that I just painted on. I'm adding a little bit more turpentine to make it just flow a little simpler. Now I'm going to introduce a little bit of burnt sienna to this color to warm up the tone, because not only does the sky get lighter, it gets warmer. Now our sky's looking pretty good. We've got to start working on our main rock. I just can't wait to get my brushes into it. I'm going to switch my brush from this large brush to the same brush that I used when I started sketching. And I'm going to pick up burnt sienna and some white. And I'm going to have to introduce a little bit of cadmium yellow. I'm going to squeeze in some cadmium yellow under my palette. Now I'm going to try to keep this part of my palette warm and the other part of my palette cool. That way I can kind of keep my palette a little bit organized. So the left hand side of my palette will be my warm colors, and my right hand side of my palette will be my cool colors. And this will be the color for my warm rock. I've got white in that. I'm going to introduce just a little bit of blue to help create a little softer value. I'm going to just start laying in my sketch again. We're going to outline the line that I covered up the mountain with the sky. And since this is a little closer to the color of the rock, sketching my sketch just to make sure that it is correct before I actually start applying my shadows. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take my burnt sienna and cobalt blue, mix them together, and we're going to start working on the shadow side of the rock. We usually want to start our rock with the shadow side first. The highlights so far have just been a little footnote. We're going to introduce a little bit of white to create the right value, and blue to create the shadow. I'm applying this color into the shadow color. I'm going to be a little bit bold and cover larger areas with this tone and create the shadow side of my rock. And I'm going to squeeze that out towards the right side of my palette and start mixing this color into the same colors that I have been using, but more white at this point. And I'm going to mix the viridian green into my colors. I'm going to add a little bit of blue, viridian green, a little bit of burnt sienna, and a lot of white. Now this is the background mountain. There's quite a bit of cool green tones. And now we start painting in the background tone. And I'm squinting my eyes and just getting a value of that mountain all by itself. What we want to do is start creating some of the reflection in the water. And what I'm going to do is just take this color and just drag it vertically down into my water. This will start a reflection. Back to the same dark color, the cobalt blue and burnt sienna tone. That's the same color as my bridge here. And I'm going to bring some of that into my reflection. Again, vertical strokes. And I'm going to hold the brush this way in my hand. I'm going to go just back and forth ever so slightly, just blending my colors together. Just allowing the colors to just blend wherever they want. This will create movement in my water and also give the illusion that the water's flat. And I'm going to start laying in my highlights just like this. Just pulling the stroke down. If I need to correct my rock at any point, I will. But I've corrected my rock so many times that it should be absolutely perfect now. Okay, now with all of the highlights done, we're just about ready to finish this painting. We've got to start concentrating on some of the bushes and some of the trees. So what I'm going to do is first put in the trunk again of the tree that we've already painted out. I'm going to mix cobalt blue and burnt sienna. That's exactly the same color that I used before. And I'm going to start placing in the trunk of the tree. And just drag my brush down and just recreate the shape again. And I'm going to stay pretty true to the shape that I see. And we're going to put in the branches. And then we're going to put in the trunk for the other tree. And put in the branches. We can stay fairly loose at this point. Just make sure that all the branches are attached. Now we're going to switch to a bigger brush, and we're going to start putting in the foliage with burnt sienna and cobalt blue. In fact, what I want to do is I'm going to switch to a fan brush. I'm going to take cobalt blue and burnt sienna. I'm just going to take the corner of the brush and just lightly hit the edges of my tree. Now you're going to put in your trees on your main rock. Again, we're going to start off with the base color first, and that softens the whole painting. Trees add a lot, especially when you're painting this many rocks. And in between the crevices there's a little grass, so I'm going to go ahead and just take the flat of the fan brush, pull up ever so slightly along the edge of the rocks, and right up in the middle of the rocks there's bushes that go in. And now what we're going to do is highlight these bushes. This is burnt sienna, radiant, and cad yellow light. And by introducing a little bit of white, we can get a much brighter highlight. Really feels like the light's hitting that area. Switch to a little small brush, and we're going to start putting some of the little tiny trunks of the trees. And we're just going to skip a little bit of this color, and wherever it wants to attach itself to the canvas, we'll just let it happen. Don't put a lot of pressure onto your brush. Notice I'm holding the brush very lightly like this, and just let the brush just skip wherever it wants to. Expanded instructional DVDs that feature an hour-long demonstration of today's painting and other paintings in the series are available at the Grandview by calling 1-800-511-1337. Join us on our website, thegrandview.org, and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting, along with a free diagram of today's subject. Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
Plein magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com